What's on, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Ross, I like games, and today we need to talk about the Mad Titan Shadow. I know it's been delayed in some places, we've had it in the UK, I've played through the campaign a few times now, a couple times of each hero. I feel like I'm in a really good position to talk about it, so let's have a gander. For those of you that haven't got hold of it yet, I'm not going to be going full-on spoilers, but I am going to be having to explain how the different scenarios and heroes work. So it can't be completely spoiler free, not really. By the very nature of it, we are going to have to go through some stuff, but I will try and keep it as light as possible. So starting off with the heroes then, Spectrum. I'm in love with Spectrum. I did not expect to be loving Spectrum. I thought I would be a huge fan of Adam Warlock, and Spectrum wouldn't be that good. I love Spectrum. The deal is you've got your free energy forms, and basically each of them gives you +2 to one of your basic skills, and then the one that gives you extra attack does a damage when you switch into it. The one that gives you extra thwart takes away a threat when you go into it, and the one that gives you extra defense heals one as you go into it. So when you flick to hero mode, you get to choose one of those forms to go into, and essentially that means that you get to be a really good attacker, but rubbish at the others, or, you know, whichever one of the ones you want. And then there are some cards that'll help you go into it. Speed of Light lets you change energy forms and draw a card, which is brilliant for a zero-cost card. So you can essentially be an attacker, but then flick to defensive mode, for instance, with a card like that. And then they've all got their particular big one. So Gamma Blast, for me, Gamma Blast is the best card that Monica Rambeau's got. I adore Gamma Blast. I am by nature an aggressive player though, so please do bear that in mind. And this is a card, it's a free cost card, which is actually not that bad really as you're playing through. And you've changed the Gamma Energy form. Remember that lets you deal a damage, which is great for pinging off tough status counters. And then you deal 7 damage to an enemy. But if you're already in Gamma Energy form, you gain Overkill. And then there's one that helps you defend and one that helps you thwart. And there can be big swings. My very first game ever with Spectrum, I took down Ebony more in 2 turns with 0 threat on the main scheme because I hit my free Gamma Blast early and it was all over. Also got to give a shout out to Energy Duplication that just lets you get extra energy as you go through. It's really cool. Now, she comes out of the box as a leadership hero, and essentially there's just a lot of cool leadership stuff going on here. But, I mean, Captain America for me is a particular highlight. It's got toughness, and you reduce the cost to play by 1 for each Avenger character you control. So you can actually end up being fairly cheap-ish here. And that does make a bit of a difference. But essentially, the way Spectrum plays is that it's awkward in that you've got to try and make sure you're in the right energy form. But if you do it right, you are supremely powerful and it's ridiculous. Now, Adam Warlock is the one that I was excited about. Remember, when you're deck building, you've got to include an equal number of cards from all aspects, and you're limited to 1 of any non-Adam Warlock card. But you've also got a skill that lets you basically remove a status card at the cost of any card from your hand, which is awesome. Now, the thing about Adam Warlock is, at any point during your turn, you can discard a card from your hand, and if it's aggression, you deal 2 damage, justice remove 2 threat, protection you heal 1 damage, and leadership you boost all of your stats. So that always gives you options. So what Adam Warlock is able to do a lot is you are able to really start playing around and doing lots of little things as you go through, and that does give you a huge advantage. Now, I do really appreciate the fact that you've got Soul World here. Soul World is ridiculous. Soul World is nuts. I thought it was going to be amazing when it was spoiled. It was one of the cards shown in the spoilers. It has proven to be that. Because when your deck runs out, sure, you take an encounter card, which sucks, but you place a soul counter here, and then at any point you can go alter ego and completely heal. It's ridiculous. It's one of the most broken cards we've seen. I stand by that, absolutely. It is absolutely crazy. But you've got things like Cosmic Ward, which allows you to just cancel a treachery card when it comes around, which again seems a little bit over the top good. Karmic Blast will deal really high damage, but it's not without its risk, because you've got to discard the top 4 cards of your deck, or up to do extra damage. But then again, it's not the end of the world, because, like I say, when you run out of your deck, Soul World becomes amazing. What's really good, however, is when you start playing around with cards like Mystic Senses. There are 2 copies of Mystic Senses, and essentially, when you use your skill, you get to draw a card. So essentially, every time you use your Battle Mage ability, if you got 2 Mystic Senses out, and that happened pretty often when I was playing Adam Warlock, I discard a card from my hand, get a bonus, but draw 2 cards, which is ridiculous. And we also have a copy of Warlock's Cape, which will ready you when you use Battle Mage. So you essentially use Battle Mage, draw 2 cards and ready yourself. When you've got those 3 cards out, Adam Warlock becomes absolutely nuts. And then, of course, like I say, it's all 4 aspects, so you're going to find something you like as you go through here in terms of actually having cool cards to use. I enjoyed Adam Warlock. I very much enjoyed it, especially, like I say, when you got 2 Mystic Senses and Warlock's Cape down, it becomes really good. However, I actually liked playing a Spectrum more, which I did not expect to happen. Now, through the scenarios, we start with Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw is honestly a very standard villain. I'm going to be a little bit more superficial here. We were told quite a lot about the hero, so I'm not spoiling so much. Whereas with the villains, we weren't told as much, so I'm going to be as superficial as I can while still giving you a flavour. So Ebony Maw, basically, you have the spell environment cards that come out throughout the game. And they all start with invocation counters on, and when the invocation counters run out, the spell activates, and that's a bit of a problem. So Fireball would be an example here. It's one whereby after the last invocation counter is removed, you discard it and deal 4 damage, but it enters with 4 invocation counters, and Ebony Maw itself tells you that essentially every time you activate, you remove an invocation counter from each of your spells. So it basically takes 4 turns. And that's what's interesting about Ebony Maw. It's not a particularly difficult scenario. There's not a huge amount going on, and that's a good thing, because in some of the others, there really is. But essentially, with Ebony Maw, you will sometimes find there are multiple environments, and if you play the scenario enough, you will have those turns where there are literally 4 or 5 of these activating at once. And those turns can be brutal, which means it essentially ends up putting you on a really big clock, and that is incredibly fun. It's quite a quick scenario a lot. I've done it in 2 turns with Spectrum, but if you don't finish it quickly and the spells keep adding up, it gets very interesting indeed. Now from there you move on to Proxima Midnight and Corvus Glaive as a pair of heroes. Like we've seen, you only ever have one of them activating against you at a time. But you have 2 main schemes, and essentially one of the main schemes, when it actually works, deals 6 damage to Avengers Tower, and the other main scheme, if it is successful, deals each player 1 face-down encounter card. You don't lose when the stages are completed, you lose because either you get defeated, or because Avengers Tower gets broken. Avengers Tower is another 2-sided card. As a side note, there are lots of 2-sided cards that stay in play and don't go into your deck ever. I like putting all of these cards in top loaders to protect them because I'm flipping them around all the time. I used a lot of top loaders when I was sleeving up this set. But essentially, when 9 damage goes on Avengers Tower, you flip it. And then when 9 damage goes on it after it's flipped, you lose the game. So when you look at the 2 scenarios, the one that damages Avengers Tower is the one you really need to focus on. There are obviously other cards that will damage it, and here it's a little bit weird because neither of the villains are particularly scary, but Corvus Glaive, when you make an undefended attack, will deal damage to Avengers Tower, so you pretty much always have to defend against Corvus Glaive, or else you are going to take too much damage. Proxima Midnight, when she attacks you, you've got to either give a +2 attack or take a damage to Avengers Tower, but because there are treachery cards that will damage Avengers Tower, you have to be careful. The first game I played, Avengers Tower got flipped and it went very badly, and I won, but at what cost? In subsequent games, I never let Avengers Tower flip, but you have to basically really focus in, always defend against Corvus Glaive, always give Proxima Midnight the extra attack and just deal with it. Always make sure that you are focusing on the scheme, which is going to damage the tower, and if you do that, you'll be okay, but it really forces you to do that. And that incidentally makes it a very fun scenario for me, because you're not really doing what you would normally do. You are focusing really heavily in on anything that could affect the tower. That's where you have to go. And I'm not going to spoil all of them here, but there are downsides. If you let Avengers Tower flip over, you will pay for it as the game goes along. Not telling you how, but there are certain things you need to do. Your first run through the scenario is going to basically be a disaster, unless you read ahead in the book to see what's going to happen, because there are things that you're like, it doesn't matter if Avengers Tower flips. Ho, ho, ho. It matters, ladies and gentlemen. It matters. Also, again, it's nothing I'm going to get into in this review, but there are certain side schemes that you're told to put out during some of the scenarios, and defeating those side schemes can give you new allies to use, or new minions to fight against, but then if you don't defeat the minions, you get punished for it, and these things are cool. Again, I don't need to go through them. Now, one of the weirdest surprises, and you can't play this unspoiled in this regard, but one of the weirdest surprises here is Thanos is the third scenario. And this is not what we're expecting, ladies and gentlemen, because, of course, this is called Mad Titan Shadow. We assumed, and I think fairly, that Thanos was going to be the fifth scenario. It isn't, but there's no way you can sleeve it up without finding that out, so sorry. Now, Thanos on the face of it doesn't look that bad. Stalwart means he can't be stunned or confused, but 1 scheme, 2 attack, it's fine. The thing is, Thanos comes with the Infinity Stone deck, which gives Infinity Gauntlet, which boosts all the stats, and every time he activates against you, you either put down an Infinity Stone or you activate the Infinity Stone which is there, and that makes things very, very different indeed. That makes a huge difference. And Infinity Stones could be things like the Mind Stone was shown off pre-release, whereby it confuses you, but if you're already confused, you discard a card at random from your hand. And yes, there are cards that will bring out those Infinity Stones a little bit faster. I mean, the main scheme starts off putting the top card of the Infinity Stone deck into play, so that means that it's the first Infinity Stone is going to activate during Thanos' first activation, which is, clearly awkward. Sorry. There's not really much you can do about that, ladies and gentlemen. So hey-ho. And Thanos is not as difficult as I was expecting, but the stats get buffed pretty gosh darn quickly. Having the Infinity Stones popping off regularly is pretty gosh darn annoying, and there are some big things going on here. So, no, it's not quite as amazingly difficult as you might have expected, but this is not a walk in the park. The one thing I will do is tell you, you probably want to try and defeat Scheme 1, and don't let Thanos go on to Scheme 2. If you let him go on to Scheme 2, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, Hela comes in with the third scheme, and this is something we didn't know, but again, you cannot sleeve this up without finding out about it, so I don't feel too bad talking about it. And Hela is a hero that flips and cannot be defeated. When you defeat her, you flip her, and she gets a noticeable downgrade in stats when she's flipped, which is nice. Now, Hela is a very, very interesting scenario, I think is a way to put it. It took me like 5 minutes when I was setting this up first time to figure out what the bejesus was going on. Now, essentially, you start off with your main scheme, and your main scheme has Odin attached to it, and what you're trying to do is basically free Odin, and once you've freed Odin, you then get to actually defeat Hela. If you freed Odin, then you defeat Hela, you're good. Incidentally, you can flip her over to her other side, whereby she becomes really weak and rubbish, but as soon as you defeat a side scheme, you flip her back, and you will be defeating side schemes often. So, especially early on, you will pretty regularly be like, yay, I flipped her over. Oh man, now I've got to defeat this side scheme. And there becomes a real question of whether it's worth bothering to flip her over with all the side schemes, and there are a bunch of them. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but essentially, yeah, they escalate, ladies and gentlemen. They really, really escalate. Because you start off with Nipperheller? Maybe. And Nipperheller comes in. I don't know how it's pronounced, alright? Nobody does. And you've got Garm. And Nipperheller's got an acceleration token, so you take an extra threat on the main scheme when this is out. So you want to try and get rid of it, and it's only 2 threat plus 1 per person, so it's going to be fine. The problem is, you cannot remove threat from Nipperheller until you get rid of Garm, who's got toughness. And the thing is, you take out Garm, and then you take out Nipperheller, but then you've got your second pair of side scheme and minion. And then you take that out, and you've got your third pair of side scheme and minion. When you've done all of that, then yes, it does get a little bit easier, but Hela gets +1 scheme and attack and +2 hit points per person for each side scheme in the victory display. So by the time you actually take out all 3 of those side schemes, Hela's got 4 scheme, 4 attack, 14 hit points. Hit points aren't a huge problem, but a 4 scheme, 4 attack absolutely can be. So you're in this weird situation where you've got to take out all of these minions and side schemes, but every time you do, the game gets a little bit harder, and it is it's one of my favorite scenarios. I think it's one of the best designed scenarios we've actually seen in Marvel Champions so far. I think it's absolutely brilliant. It is kind of nerve-wracking to play, and it's kind of horrible. And it's just, it's so mean. It's so mean. But it's actually really, really fun and interactive, and I really appreciate it. It is very, very unique, but it is extremely cool. And then we finish off with Loki. Now, Loki, again, was not spoiled on the front of the box, but again, you know, when you're sleeving it up, you are going to see that Loki is there. Except it's not actually Loki, it's one of 5 random Lokis, which is weird. Actually, I'm telling a lie. We did actually have Loki revealed. One of the Lokis was revealed in the pre-release material. So we knew there was a Loki coming. We had seen a Loki. But my point is, you're playing against a random Loki, and there are various things which can change which Loki you're playing against. And they're all weird, and none of them... There's no easy Loki, all right? There's just no such thing as an easy Loki. And Loki also gets the Infinity Gauntlet deck. All the Infinity Stones, just like with Thanos. And Loki's a weird one. Because every time I start playing against Loki, I go, this isn't so bad. But Loki's deck just gets nuts super quickly. And I don't want to spoil all the surprises, but every time I started playing against Loki, I went, oh, this isn't so bad. And then it got redonk. And the way it works is weird. Essentially, what you do is you set how many Lokis you want to take down. You set yourself a target of how many Lokis you need to defeat in order to actually win the game. Which is genuinely weird. And every time you defeat one, another one comes out at random. My advice to you with this scheme, just play it like survival mode in a beat 'em up, in a fighting game. Because it doesn't really matter. Like, if you want to take down one Loki, cool, take down one Loki. But you just keep going. Like, give yourself the nominal victory or whatever, but then flip another Loki and keep going. That is the most fun way to play. My record, incidentally, is 3, and that I felt very good about 3. This was using pre-constructed Spectrum. The pre-constructed decks are fine. They're not amazing. If you did proper deck building, you could get through all 5. It's not easy, but you will be okay. And the way you really put up the difficulty is by going multiple Lokis, because like I've said, it's hard to really explain, but when you play it, you'll see Loki escalates really quickly. I played Loki a bunch of times. Every time I went, oh, I'm doing so much better this time, this is going to be fine. And by turn 3, it was just starting to overwhelm me. But it's the final scenario of a 5-scenario campaign. That should be the way it works. Overall, this is a 5 Wossy set. And I don't think there is any question or hesitation there whatsoever. It is a phenomenal set. I think both the heroes are really, really good. Although I am genuinely surprised that it turns out that I like Spectrum more than Adam Warlock. I honestly did not see that coming. And the scenarios are really cool. I mean, like I say, your Ebony Moore scenario is a very kind of quick starter scenario. If you look at it in a vacuum, you might not love it. If you look at it as the first scenario in a 5-scenario campaign, it is perfect. And like I say, the countdown with the spells can get really interesting. Corvus Glaive and Proxima Midnight, it's not the best scenario in the box, but it's really interesting. And the fact that you have to go away from your normal plan to protect the tower, and bearing in mind the entire point of it is protecting the tower, the set is called Tower Defense. The clue's in the name. I greatly enjoyed. Like I say, I did that wrong the first time, but after that I was alright. Thanos, I love, and I'm not spoiling the really cool thing with Thanos, but there is a really cool thing with Thanos you'll see when you play it. Not as difficult as I was expecting, but with the Infinity Stones, it's extremely cool. Hela, I think, is one of the best scenarios they've ever done. I think it's brilliant. I love the fact that every time I start the scenario, I'm like, I just need to take out this minion and side scheme and it'll be easier. No, they're even worse! And this just keeps going until I win. I think it's maybe the most cool and inventive scenario they've done. And then Loki's just absolutely nuts. Fighting random Lokis, having the Infinity Gauntlet, and it's nothing that's really easy to explain, but just the mixture of cards in that encounter deck just got nuts for me every time I played it. Overall, if you're a fan of the Marvel Champions card game, even though Adam Warlock and Spectrum might not be your favourite heroes, and this doesn't really have headlining villains outside of Loki and Thanos, you know, unless you're a bigger Marvel fan, you're probably not that excited about Ebony, Moore, and Hela. They've all been in the movies, but you know what I mean. But I think if you're playing through it, this one is really, really good. And I think it's certainly in terms of the scenarios, this is my favourite of the big boxes so far. I still think Spider-Woman I like more than any of the heroes in this particular box. And I think hero-wise, I'd probably still go Rise of the Red Skull. But I think it's certainly in terms of scenarios, this is number 1. So there we go, quite a long review, but I did want to talk about both the heroes and all 5 scenarios. Now I've said my piece, it's time for you to say your piece, and you can do that in the comment section, so go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wossy. That's where we talk about Marvel Champions and all the other card games I like, and they are many. And please do consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGradio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all kinds of fun things. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching Wossy Plays.